Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the December 4th, 2013 meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We have a quorum present, so I'll call the meeting to order. We have one public hearing scheduled for this evening. That is a PUD amendment application for approximately 2 acres in the Indian Hills PUD be used for a restaurant along South Church Street at Calumet Trace. Mr. Bill Huddleston on behalf of Indian Hills LLC is the applicant. Ms. Green, good evening.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to you. Our first and only public hearing this evening is for you to consider amending an existing PUD, or Planned Unit District, for approximately 2 acres. This property is shaded blue on the map that's on the screen before you, and it is located along the eastern side of South Church Street and south of Calumet Trace. And the property is approximately 2 acres. It is a part of the Indian Hills Plan Development, which was approved many years ago. The owners of the golf course are requesting to make a change to the zoning to allow a restaurant to be developed on this 2 acres. For that change, it must be approved by both the Planning Commission and City Council. So tonight you will be holding a public hearing to consider the request to amend the plan development to allow a restaurant use on this 2 acres. You have been included in your agenda materials a small program book that outlines the amendments and the specifications of the plan development, if you so approve it. Mr. Bill Huddleston is representing the applicants, and he would like to give you a brief presentation prior to the public hearing. The restaurant, as shown in the program book, does not allow fast food restaurant or fast food drive-through. They're describing it as a high-quality sit-down restaurant. But at this time, I'll invite Mr. Huddleston to go over the project. If you have any questions, either before or after the public hearing, I'd be glad to answer them.
Good evening, Mr. Huddleston.
Thank you, Ms. Green, and good evening, Chairman Lamb and members of the Planning Commission. I'm Bill Huddleston, President of Huddleston Steel Engineering here in Murfreesboro, and I'm here on behalf of Indian Hills LLC. That is a partnership made up of 4 partners, 2 of which are here tonight, Mr. Jim Mackey and Mr. John Floyd. They've owned and operated this golf course since the 1990s. What we're looking to do tonight is amend part of the Indian Hills PUD to allow for a restaurant site at the corner of Calumet Trace and South Church Street. We're proposing a very nice sit-down restaurant that will serve the neighborhood and the surrounding community with a quality dining experience. This will actually be an amenity for the neighborhood, especially in light of the fact that the clubhouse didn't pan out as originally envisioned. This high-quality restaurant will fit nicely with the development that's along South Church Street now. As shown on the 3rd sheet of the pattern book, let's see, is this going to...
Yeah, the cable department can put that on the screen. There you go.
Okay, great, thank you. As shown on the 3rd sheet of the pattern book, the site has plenty of room, and the access on 231 will line up with the proposed access for O'Reilly's Auto Parts, which will be directly across the street. With this program and this revision to the PUD, we will effect 1 golf hole. That golf hole will be number 12, and what that will end up as is a very beautiful par 3 hole. This restaurant will be 425 feet from the nearest home. That's almost 1.5 football fields. We're committed to significant landscaping on the site, and that's shown on sheet 4 in the pattern book. We will also maintain the very nice entrance to Indian Hills. We do not have any plans to touch that at all. We'll be leaving the monuments and the landscaping there. And in fact, the landscaping that we'll be providing on site will actually enhance that entrance. Again, this will be a very nice sit-down restaurant of high quality, and there will be no drive-through speaker. We'll be shooting for the likes of a P.F. Chang's or a Stony River Grill, if you're familiar with those. We're committed to the architectural integrity worthy of the Indian Hills development. At this time, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I'll be here after the public hearing also to answer questions at that time.
Any questions for Mr. Huddleston at this time from the Planning Commission? Thank you, Mr. Huddleston.
Thank you.
Okay, before I open the public hearing, let me briefly go over our rules in case you've not attended one of our public hearings previously. I'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. please come to the microphone and clearly state your name and give your address if you would. We would ask you to hold your comments to no more than 3 minutes, because I kind of suspect quite a few people might want to speak tonight. So if you would, we have a lot of folks wanting to come up, so please keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes, and if you would, try not to be redundant as far as what everybody else said in front of you. If you do have questions, the staff will make a note of your questions at the conclusion of the public hearing. They will attempt to answer your questions to the best of their ability or address those to Mr. Huddleston for his answers. If you do have comments or questions, please direct it to the Planning Commission itself and not to the audience or the applicant themselves, because we will be dealing with the questions at a later time. Just for comments, there's any comments from the crowd that's not on microphone there, not from a person that's recognized, applause and that type of thing are deemed inappropriate, so please refrain from any type of outburst to that. All that being said, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb and Commissioners. My name is Sharon Fitzgerald. My husband, Lyndall, and I've lived in Indian Hills for 24 years. We live at 234 Council Bluff Parkway. I'm up here today to present a petition that's been signed by, I believe, we've got the number right, 441 residents of Indian Hills. We were kind of caught off guard last week. We kind of thought this issue had been laid to rest, and then it popped back up again with signs at the entrance. And so trying to get signatures together and get petitions distributed during Thanksgiving week was a challenge, but I think we've done a pretty good job. Basically, the petition says that we're concerned about three things, and the first thing is the character of the entrance to our neighborhood. We don't think a restaurant at the entrance is something that we think adds to our neighborhood at all. Number two, we're concerned about traffic. We are very concerned about traffic. That intersection is extraordinarily busy all times of the day, and particularly in the evening rush hour when this restaurant would be in full swing. So we're really concerned about that as well. And the final point we want to make is that we're concerned about public safety. That intersection has its challenges. Sadly, someone just lost their life there last month. Mm-hmm. And we're concerned, too, with the unique neighborhood, character of our neighborhood, in that people are riding golf carts. And so I'm just worried about that mix of traffic and golf carts all right up there at the entrance, right there next to 231. So I'd like to present this petition. Who do I give that to? All righty. Thank you so much. Could everybody who's here who's opposed please stand up and just let them know how we feel? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fitzgerald. Before the next person comes up, let me go over one thing I failed to say. The purpose of this public hearing is to formulate a proposal to the City Council. The Planning Commission will make a recommendation to the City Council whether we think it should be approved or whether we do not think it's going to be approved or should be approved. If it is approved or if it's disapproved here, the applicant still has the right to take it before the City Council, in which case, when it goes before the City Council, another public hearing will be held just like this one tonight, so you would have another chance to voice your concerns one way or the other. So I neglected to say that on the front end. Who would like to be next?
My name is Herschel Whitlock, and I live at 387 Natchez Trace Court, next door to the clubhouse. And I favor the rezoning, not because it's a restaurant, but because I think it would enhance the neighborhood. That has been the devaluation of the property is not a factor in the subdivision, because, as you know, Bojangles built on the other entrance to Indian Hills and had no effect whatsoever, traffic or devaluation of property values. The corner would look much better than what is there now, the restroom and the high grass. And the property devaluation, if the golf course does not remain open, the property values would devaluate very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitlock.
My name is Jim Burnett. I live in 317 Calumet Trace, which is very close to this intersection. My concern is this. I'm a retired architect, and I've dealt with planning commissions and codes and everything for years in 40 of the states of this country. And the hardest thing that I always found to do was to get spot zoning done in a PUD. That's very difficult to do, and I want you all to think about that, because that's exactly what you're doing with this site. You're doing spot zoning in a PUD. The other thing is, and I talked to someone in the traffic division today, and this year, between Warrior Drive and this intersection, there have been 23 accidents, 6 of those fatal. And only 2 weeks ago, a young man was killed on a motorcycle at this intersection, and traffic was tied up for at least 2 hours. You couldn't even get in the entrance to Indian Hills. So it really, I don't care how well the pictures look like and all the wonderful landscaping that was talked about, but you can't landscape a parking lot full of cars. There's no way you can do that. And you're taking away from something that has been a very long-standing drawing card, and that's the entrance to this complex. And it's also a drawing card for the golf course, to be able to see the golf course from the road and know that there's a nice golf course in there that you can play on. So I think the golf course is trying to get some money, but they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot, because if it ends up being with a lot of changes and you end up with a lot of par 3 holes, people just aren't going to want to play there anymore. So, but the biggest problem is the traffic. It's very, very bad, and any time you have people crossing over at red lights, I have to sit there every time I leave and the light changes. I sit there for 10 to 15 seconds and looking both ways at 6 lanes and make sure the cars and the trucks are going to stop before I pull out, because I've had several close calls myself, and I'm sure other people that have had that same situation. So the biggest problem is we're creating a real traffic problem with this proposal that is before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Ricky Jones, and I live at 2642 Big Eagle Trail. I've been committed to the Indian Hills Golf Course for quite some time. I actually purchased one of the original lots at Indian Hills back in the very beginning. Bill Hunter built a custom home for me, one of the very first on the first fairway there at Indian Hills. And we also own a townhouse that we use as a rental property there. The thing is my wife and I think most all of the other owners at Indian Hills bought there and paid premium prices to live in a golf course community. I know in many cases people paid as much as $35,000 in extra charges just to be able to live on the golf course and to be able to look over a fairway. The home that we live in is actually one of the 2 closest homes to this property. I walked it off today. Literally, my boundary of my property is 120 feet from the side of the road where that restaurant's going to be. And the thing is in a PUD, I think everyone went into it knowing what this was. The people who bought into it as community owners knew it was a golf course community. The people who bought the golf course to run it as a golf course knew that's what they were buying into. They weren't buying into a land investment company. And so there's a lot of discussion about the aesthetics and whether a restaurant is a good thing there. Obviously, the traffic issues I think are very significant. One of the things is that more than half of the people that go to that restaurant will be forced to pull into the Indian Hills subdivision, because the way it's structured is all of the traffic coming from downtown Murfreesboro going to there cannot turn in any other way to get into that restaurant other than coming in our primary entrance. And as they've mentioned, traffic is horrendous. There's a very short turn lane to get in there. Between 5 and 7 o'clock on a weeknight, especially a Friday night, it's almost impossible for us to get in there, much less the people that are trying to get out in the evenings. The other impact is privacy. In our particular home, we've spent about $35,000 to $40,000 planting trees, doing landscaping, building an enclosed patio. I've given you some pictures of our home before and after the fact. And so we've insulated ourselves as much as possible from the Highway 231 traffic and the noise and to get a little bit of privacy. And now that we've done that, we're looking now at the other side of the street where potentially there's going to be lights on until midnight, smells, noise, and that's really, I don't think, something that the people that live there were going to expect. And so the other thing, too, is I think there's been a mention about the Bojangles restaurant. I mean, the last time this ownership group was given an opportunity to sell property, they were able to sell a lot on 231. It was not part of the PUD. They sold it and put a fast food restaurant there. That could have easily been an upscale restaurant that they're talking about with a view overlooking the 18th or overlooking the 12th fairway. But instead, they sold it to basically a fried chicken fast food drive-through. And so the final thing I have is that I've reviewed the 6 criteria that the Planning Commission is using according to their bylaws as to when zoning changes should be made. The first 5, I really didn't see anything that necessarily applied. There are at least 8 or 10 commercial lots for sale today between our entrance and the city limits going south. And so the last one that's the most important to me says, will this change constitute a privilege to an individual? I think it's paraphrase that to a small number of individuals instead of promoting the general welfare. And I think not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Yes, sir.
My name is John McCanless, and I live at 2635 Big Eagle Trail. Basically, I live across the street and 2 doors down from the gentleman who was just talking, so I'm pretty close to this, too. One of the fundamental differences between this proposed change and the Bojangles thing going in is the Bojangles thing was a machine repair shop, basically, that the golf course used at that lot. It was not free, open, green space. Where this restaurant's planning to go in is free, open, green space, and you never get that back once that's gone. And also, you've then bookended that property and really sort of set it up for development all the way down. And I think this is like the camel sticking his head in the tent. And I'm against it, and I just wanted to let you know. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
My name is Elizabeth Allen, and I live at 418 Council Bluff. We also own investment property in Indian Hills. My concern is we bought our home and moved into Indian Hills because it was a golf course community. The entrance into the community is very pleasant. It's very aesthetically pleasing. I am concerned that once this is changed, the traffic increases, our property values will depreciate. I cannot believe that people will wish to live in the community with a restaurant and massive amounts of traffic and potentially people driving through the complex up in the area where the swimming pool and the playground are and speeding. Once the property values depreciate, my understanding is then also the property tax that's levied against those homes could also decrease. So there will be less money going into the coffers of the city of Murfreesboro and the county of Rutherford County if those property values decrease. And I cannot believe that they will not if you change the way this community currently is structured and the traffic patterns, which are now horrendous, but will only get worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Bud Twitty, and I live at 2915 Warpaint Court on number 10 hole that backs up to our house. Approximately 2000, we moved into Indian Hills primarily because it was a golf course community. Anything that goes on in Indian Hills, the property values are increased because it does have a golf course. You cannot go to any other community or subdivision in Murfreesboro and be on a golf course other than Indian Hills. Property values in Indian Hills are where they are because primarily the golf course is there. I'm in favor of anything that will strengthen the golf course. That's why we moved there, to be in a golf course community, and I'm in favor of anything that can be done to keep it strong. Without a golf course in Indian Hills, you will have grass fields. And if you like grass fields around your homes, then do something to try to discourage the golf course being there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Twitty. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
My name is Travis Venable. I live at 2969 Navajo Court, which is on the side where Bojangles is. And I think this is a complicated issue, number one, and a lot of these people that are for and against are our neighbors and our friends, business partners, etc. I live there with my wife, 2 small kids, and I'm actually for it. I'm for it because, A, I like the idea of being able to ride my golf cart somewhere to sit down and have a meal. I think that's an experience. I think South Church, I'm not sure it could get any worse with the traffic and such. I think there may possibly need to be a red light at Runnymede and possibly look into the timing of other red lights. I know a gentleman said that he waits 10 to 15 seconds in checking the lights before he pulls out. Well, I encourage my wife to use that entrance because it's more dangerous pulling out of Kroger's. So I think we got that issue to look at. The recessions also hit the real estate market hard. I saw what it did to my property values there in Indian Hills. I also do know that the golf course itself had a tough time staying afloat and staying competitive over the last few years. You know, I can't imagine the property values sinking anymore unless something happened to the golf course. I do think, you know, this is part of expansion. South Church has brought a lot of new homes, businesses, commerce, etc. that way. You know, it's just going to be one of these things that we're going to have to deal with. We're going to have to manage growth. And, you know, and that's where we put it in your guys' hands to make the appropriate decisions to add the infrastructure. I would like to recommend that any restaurant, if this is approved, you know, have adequate landscape and have some charm to it. Create some buffer zone. And then in the future, like the gentleman said about bookending, we'll possibly see what the sellers are willing to do with the in-between spaces. So I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. I do see it as something that could enhance the neighborhood and could add an amenity, at least for myself and my family. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. Thank you. Luann Selnick, 2620 Sequoia Trace. The first street to your left, about 300 feet after you come in the entrance where Big Eagle and Sequoia are, is the location. Between the entrance, which is really pretty, and our street is a golf cart crossing. So the people cross Calumet Trace with all the traffic on their golf carts. Rivergale Warriors, we'll see a lot of our young over there practicing with the teams. And you always want to go really slow to ensure that our children are safe. If you go around our community, especially October, Halloween, you won't be able to get to 231 because both sides of our streets are packed with cars and kids. And 4th of July, yeah. And we bought a lot for our children for the playground because we care about our children, we care about our community, and we become a community. Do I want a restaurant at the entrance? I love development. I was a developer here. I bought my lot from John Floyd. Thank the world of him. But I don't want a restaurant at the entrance of when I bought in a planned unit development. They did condos. It's great. They're beautiful condos. And if you go right now and Google homes for sale in Indian Hills, what will you see? Beautiful golf course lots backed up to hole number 9, hole number 18. So you market the lots you buy, and then you want to sell the golf courts. I am totally opposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Elliott. Anybody else?
My name's Kyle Watson. I'm at 102 White Cloud Trail, which is on number 11, right in between the Bojangles and where the proposed site is, backs up to 231. I wanted to address page 1 of the proposal and read a sentence that I think is kind of what the focal point is here. There in the first paragraph where it says, the focus of this development was to create a lifestyle community that included golf and leisure as a key to its character. And then it goes on to define what that is. And what that is a golf course, a pool, a playground, a monument. Nowhere in the original plan was there ever to be a restaurant besides the one that is part of the clubhouse. If the original developers had wanted that, they would have obviously put that in there. So my problem with this and why I oppose this is that I believe you're trying to squeeze in a 2-acre restaurant into a community that was never planned to have one. And by doing so, you are squeezing that in there, and you're putting it close to houses. We'll have to deal with noise, traffic that has been brought up, the lighting, the smells. I have 3 young children. I am concerned with the number of people that will be driving through our neighborhood as we're walking to the playground or as they're riding their bikes to the playground. The gentleman just talked about driving his golf cart to the restaurant. I would be strongly opposed to that with the amount of traffic that would be coming through there. And so I just ask that you reject this proposal. We already have the Bojangles. I'm afraid, and my fear and my belief is that if this continues, that all the property behind my house will become retail space, and we will no longer live in a lifestyle community, but we will live in a retail community.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name is Robert Brooks. I live at 2603 Mohican Court. I oppose this application to amend the PUD. The overwhelming concern I've heard is about safety. I do have a question, and that has a traffic study been performed? Maybe you can't answer that now. If it has not been performed, I guess I'm curious as to how the Planning Commission can make an educated decision without a traffic study being performed. If one has been performed, it should be made available to the public. My next concern has to do with stormwater. It has to do with the environment. I've looked at the FEMA maps, and this proposed establishment is in a low area, and it would have to be raised to have proper drainage for that establishment. So when you add fill material, you're reducing the area for drainage, so you're increasing the intensity of runoff onto the property in the Indian Hills. Indian Hills, many homes back up to the floodplain. Maybe this is considered a small incremental add, but I'm afraid if this amendment gets approved, it will lead to additional amendment applications to continue to develop along 231 in Indian Hills, and that will further add to the flooding concerns. Converting green space to hardscape in this day and age is not something to be done lightly, in my opinion. not if you're going to be environmentally conscious. I'd also like to talk about the restaurant, the proposed restaurant, should it not work out. As Mr. Huddleston said, the clubhouse restaurant didn't pan out. If this proposed restaurant were built and it failed, the doors were shut, we're going to have a closed-down building with landscaping that might start out nice. It's going to be full of weeds. It's going to be overgrown. It's not going to be maintained. Nobody's going to put that restaurant back to the condition it was, or that property back to the condition it was beforehand. So it's just going to be an eyesore, and it's also going to contribute to reduced property values. I know that's speculation, but it has to be taken into account. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Anybody else?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. I frankly did not come here to speak this evening, but after hearing what I have heard,
excuse me, sir,
I feel like I do. I'm sorry. My name is Jack Smith. I live at 366 Calumet Trace. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's fine. I'm glad you did. But anyway, originally I was born and raised in this part of the world, but lived for 40 years in the Memphis-Shelby County area. I have over 40 years of experience in the real estate appraisal industry, not only as a chief deputy assessor in Shelby County, but also as a fee appraiser. I have never seen a property that was developed as a residential property that had a commercial entity installed at the entrance where property values did not recede, go down. I've read just some rough numbers, and these are strictly off the wall. And I would encourage you to get someone who can take the 60 to 90 days to do the study, to take a look at the property values and what they would go down based on the commercial entity at the entrance. I've never seen that happen where values did not recede. My rough number was that the county and city would lose each about $750,000 in taxes. Have someone take a look at that, someone do a study, and see what would happen if property values did recede. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anybody else?
Hi, my name is John Weishart. I live at 406 Calumet Trace, right across from the clubhouse. I am also an employee of the golf course. I'm all for this restaurant. There is a lot of change going on in South Church Street. We've got Goodwill stores, auto parts stores. I think a nice restaurant at the entrance would be great for the community, and it would also help the golf course. The golf course needs to stay open. The owners have put a lot of effort over the years into keeping this golf course open. They aren't making money at it. They're not going to make any money on this lot. It's all going into the golf course. I think the neighborhood should step up and back the golf course. If we lose the golf course, we're all going to be out a lot of money. We'll never be able to sell our houses, and I'll be looking at an empty clubhouse looking out my front window. I don't want to see that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
Bobby Wesson, my wife Angie and I live at 411 Great Sun Court. One of my concerns would be when we talk about a upscale restaurant, and I have no judgment on anybody's lifestyle, but I'm sure it would probably have an alcohol license. The entrance into the subdivision is very busy, and very often people will come through the subdivision right between the playground and swimming pool, and use the exit coming out onto South Church by Bojangles. All it would take would be one person been a little bit too much to drink and one child in the wrong place, and it wouldn't be worth it, I don't think. As for the weeds growing up and everything, I believe the city of Murfreesboro has an excellent codes department that would be in touch with whoever's letting the grounds go and could kind of hold their feet to the fire in that nature. But with a restaurant that might be serving alcohol and using it as an exit, that would be a concern for me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Would anybody else care to speak?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is John Taylor. I live at 223 Black Hawk Way, which is directly behind this proposed residence. If you go up Calumet, I live on the first street at the right, first house on the right. My wife and I bought this house about 4 years ago. We were ready to retire. We love the PUD of Indian Hills. We bought to live on the golf course. It's a very friendly neighborhood to live in. We have people walking. We have people walking their dogs. We have children playing. We have children driving golf carts. We moved there for the lifestyle which it affords. There are plenty of restaurants in Murfreesboro. You go down, there are plenty of commercial lots on Church Street where restaurants can be built if somebody wants to build one without damaging our PUD. So I didn't move there to smell food from my patio. I didn't move there to see lights coming in and out of my back window. I didn't move there to hear garbage trucks coming in at 4 o'clock in the morning loading their trash. So and against this, the whole row of houses on my street will be right behind this restaurant. And so for that reason and all the others mentioned here, I want to let you know that I am against this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, other people in the commission, I'm Jim McClellier. I live at 134 White Cloud Trail. Over the past hour or so, we've heard a lot of talk about this opportunity, and obviously I think this is a great opportunity. It's an opportunity to bring a fine dining establishment to the south side of town, which doesn't have one today. But more importantly, you've heard the opportunity that it will bring stability to the golf course. And yes, the golf course has financially struggled. All golf courses in this country have financially struggled in this economic downturn. We have an obligation as a golf course to the community. Without the community, we don't have a golf course. Without the golf course, we don't have a community. So the theme I've heard here tonight so far is that we all have the same common goal, figure out how to keep the golf course here. That's a tough challenge, as somebody said earlier. The golf course and the community go hand in hand. One does not survive without the other. The thing that we've come to the conclusion of is that something has to change. Status quo is no longer accepted. You know, I've heard the front entrance is going to be torn down. Obviously, Bill stated that that was not the case. You know, I've heard that this issue is, once approved, that the Indian Hills Golf Course will start selling off other property. Financially, this solves the problems for the golf course. We've done a pro forma study. I'm the general manager of the golf course. We've done a pro forma financial data for the golf course over the next 5 years with the reduction of the debt that this land would take care of. And it solves all of our problems. In the last 6 years, 20% of all golf courses have closed across the country. Taking the golf course, as I've heard from other neighbors, to a 9-hole golf course doesn't work either. The 20% closure rate of golf courses is greater for 9-hole golf courses than it is for 18-hole golf courses. The only thing that works for our neighborhood is the golf course to stay open and the neighborhood to thrive just as well as the golf course does. Over the past 3 years, the golf course has developed many cost-cutting improvements to the golf course. Golfers are strange people. I'm a golfer. Some of you guys are golfers. You know, we demand certain things. a golf course condition that's excellent. We demand the service that's excellent. We demand 18 holes of golf. So to turn one into a 9-hole golf course never makes any sense. The bottom line is, we have to have the golf course for this community. It's been here for 15 years in its current ownership. It went through 3 bankruptcies prior to that. The community did not survive during those bankruptcies. And the only way the community will survive is if we continue doing what we're trying to do tonight. So, given that, I humbly request that you do approve this, as I'm all for it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McAleer.
My name is Ken Haynes. I live at 2634 Big Eagle Trail. I'm here to oppose this plan for the restaurant. There are many factors involved. I think it could be said that most people here tonight do not want the restaurant. Most people here tonight would like to see the golf course stay. I realize it's a dilemma. I don't see it as the Commission's problem to try to solve the issues of our stumbling business. The Commission should be more concerned with the 400 residents who have signed this petition that was brought to you tonight, not wanting this restaurant. There are many reasons for it: safety of our children, decreasing property values of our homes. Our homes are for our family. The guys that are in this business were some of the most successful people within the county. They've owned this for a long time. I wonder, why has it not been paid off as lots within the community have been sold? If they've owned it for 15 years, 20 years, it looks like their level of debt should be pretty low by now. I just would like to ask that you all give consideration to the 400-plus residents who stand to lose value in their homes, whose children will be in jeopardy because of increased traffic flow within our community. I thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Haynes. Anybody else? Last call.
Chairman Lamb, committee. My name is Scott Bowles. I live at 2606 Kicking Bear Court. I really wasn't going to speak tonight, but it bothers me just a little bit that, I don't know, to me personally, it seems to be that we're missing a little bit of the larger point here. You've got 400 signatures there that say they do not want this. This is a planned unit development. It's a PUD. This development was done with the understanding in a contract between the developer and the city. That's you guys. This is not a piece of property that is in the front of a neighborhood that someone is wanting to rezone. We all had expectations that it would be rezoned. No one knew what it would be rezoned as, but it eventually would be. Case in point, Savannah Ridge. This is a planned unit development. These people bought, every single household in this development bought with the expectation of what was there. We don't have lots trying to be rezoned. We're not adding sections and adjusting square footages. We're changing the original concept of a PUD. I think an individual mentioned spot development. I don't know if you can do that or not. Now, of course, you can do anything that you choose to approve. All of the reasons that people have stood up here and given you not to do this are all great reasons, but none of them are as important as the fact that people, when they bought in this community, they bought into a planned unit development. they had expectations because of your commitments to that planned unit development. Just the fact that they say they don't want it with no reason at all is enough for you guys to stop and go, hold on. We need to honor what we committed to when this development was developed. I've only heard two reasons that the golf course would like to do this. Aesthetically or add an amenity to the neighborhood, which has overwhelmingly been rejected by the signatures that you have before you. The other one is for financial reasons. Now, no one likes to talk about financial reasons in this setting. The most you could get is $800,000 or $900,000 for this lot. You tack on a couple of $100,000, $150,000 in cost, moving greens and everything else, you net $700,000. They want to apply it to the debt. 7% loan is $49,000 a year in interest that they're wanting to save. That's $4,000 a month. This is the reason that they're presenting that they want to do this. $4,000 a month doesn't change a $1 million operation. It's a false argument. But that's not important. What's important is that it's a PUD. They bought in here with promises and a contract between the city and that planned unit development. I could go on and on, but I'm probably out of my 3 minutes.
Sure.
I certainly respect what the owners are wanting to do. If I owned the golf course, I would probably want to do it. But folks, you can't change a PUD. You can't change a PUD. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. Anybody else?
Where's my attorney?
Last call. Seeing no one come forward, I'm going to close the public hearing. Mr. Adelot, there were a couple of questions that probably need addressing.
Well, I heard two questions very clearly, and one of them was, has a traffic study been performed? And the answer is no. I have not seen a traffic study from this yet. Typically, for a development this small, we don't see a traffic study in the sense of hiring a traffic engineer to do a full-blown analysis. At such time as a site plan is prepared, we will look at expect the the design engineer to provide sufficient information that we can determine whether turn lanes, right turn lanes, left turn lanes, or signal modifications need to be made, deceleration lanes, that sort of thing. Typically, that would come along at the time a site plan is submitted for building permit and for plan commission review. So it has not been done, but we would expect at least a very detailed analysis before we ever granted permits to start if the zoning were approved. Stormwater and environment. Our stormwater regulations are going to require that there be no net impact. We're not going to allow them to flood anybody. So those were basically the two questions that I heard as questions.
Okay. Mr. Huddleston, you might want to come up. Did you have something you'd like to say? And there may be questions from members of the Planning Commission for you.
I'll start out by answering any questions you may have.
Okay. Briefly, landscaping and buffering requirements that you would build in, I know that was a concern.
Right. One of the things that we're proposing with this is significant landscaping over and above what's required for a development of this type. We'll be showing buffers that actually screen the parking lot. We'll be showing both evergreen and deciduous type trees with bushes mixed in so that we'll be able to screen the parking lot and lights that would possibly come from there at night. Also, lights were mentioned. Photometric plan will be provided so that there won't be any be very minimal spillover onto our property line, and then you give the additional distance that you have between our development and the existing homes, and there'll be very little light spillage from this project.
Any other questions from Mr. Huddleston from members of the Planning Commission?
No, Chairman, I have some comments after questions.
Okay.
That might be helpful, Mr. Huddleston.
Mr. Daylight, I think some of the audience mentioned PUD. Can we change PUD?
Yes, sir. By definition, a planned unit development, a PUD, in the city's zoning regulations is a mixture of commercial and residential uses. It is not uncommon for us to see amendments to planned developments or planned unit developments. I will alert the Planning Commission that next month we're going to see about 4 applications to amend various planned unit developments in the community. Some of it's very minor things. Some of it has to do with lot sizes. Some of it has to do with annexing additional land into it. By definition, a PUD or a planned development or planned unit development does allow for there to be a mixture of uses, and in fact, Indian Hills is one. The original plan did not include a restaurant at this location, but it did include the amenity center, and the original plan, I guess clubhouse, was expected to have a restaurant and a bar, and it had to have that kind of zoning in order to get a liquor license. So it is within the realm of possibility, and it is possible for the city to change them. Zoning is not something that is expected to remain the same forever. Communities mature, needs change in the community, and I'm not trying to endorse or oppose this application, but I want to clarify that issue. It is possible. I do think that when we have a mature subdivision or a mature development, that it is incumbent upon the Plan Commission and upon the City Council to be more careful and more measured in its approach. The stakeholders includes the people who bought into it. And I've heard several times people speak about how they bought into it relying upon the zoning. And that's a common thing that we hear. But zoning is not forever. Nothing is forever. And to try to keep it that way can lead to unintended consequences too. But I do think, again, I want to repeat this, that when you deal with a mature development, you have to be more careful. You have to be more sensitive to the stakeholders, because it's more than just the developer at that point. It is the people who live there.
One thing I'd like to add, and Mr. Adelite sort of talked about it, and the question is, can you change a PUD? And the answer is yes. Things change, and things have changed along South Church Street, and we all realize that. We did this original PUD application 30 years ago. A lot's happened in 30 years. One of the things that's happened is that Mr. Floyd and his partners have bought Indian Hills Golf Course, operated it, and made sure that it continued to be a viable situation, even though I'm sure you'll admit it wasn't the most profitable thing he's ever done. Now, having said that, he is committed to the golf course still, he and his partners. They're committed to being a part of that community, being a part of this community, living and working there. And we have heard a lot of good concerns tonight, a lot of valid concerns. When we first proposed, when we second proposed this PUD amendment, we said we'd go and meet with a lot of people who had voiced concerns in the past, and we did that. During that time, we were able to clear up a lot of misconceptions, and also to hear what was on the neighbors' minds. I think at this point, what we would like to do is ask for you to defer this item so that we can meet again with all of these property owners, and what we'll do is hold we'll call it a neighborhood meeting, and we will address their concerns. We'll talk about things that can be done to help allay their fears, and we'll see if there are things that can't be done, but that can be where we can minimize the impact that this development would have on the neighborhood. So we would like to propose a deferral at this point to give us a chance to have a full neighborhood meeting after what we've done is meet sort of one-on-one up to this point.
Think you'll be able to do that before next month sometime?
I do not think it's realistic to try to have a neighborhood meeting we got Christmas and New Year's coming up. I think we'd be looking at probably the first or second week in January. So it would not be before your next
Probably
meeting.
it might be February then before we get it back up. Is that appropriate, Mr. Whitlock? Can we defer for 60 days?
If the applicant's requesting it, that is not a problem at all.
60-day deferral.
That'll be good, and we'll be in contact with Mr. Adelot and his staff on when it's appropriate to hold this meeting and meet with you again.
Mr. Bowles, I cannot take questions from the floor. I'm sorry. Mr. Gilley.
Joseph, before I make some of the comments I want to ask you if you could address the issue about the distance of how far and how the letter process is notification. I know there's a sign at the entrance of the subdivision. I live awfully close. Matter of fact, my house is in the pictures that Mr. Jones supplied, and I didn't get a letter on it. Can you explain what our process is in that regard?
Yes, we endeavor to send a notice by mail to all property owners within 250 feet of a application. We would post a sign, and we advertise in the newspaper. We advertise in the Post. We advertise it typically about on a Sunday, about a week and a half in advance of the meeting. If you didn't get a notice, I don't know. I'd need to measure and see if you were just outside the range. But certainly, if you would like for us to send you a notice and you didn't get one this time, if you contact my office by email or by correspondence, we'll put you on a notification list for the next time. Certainly, as Mr. Lamb mentioned, regardless of what happens at the Planning Commission here, if it moves on to the City Council, there will be another public hearing, and we certainly would want to keep you abreast of it. I'd also alert you that if you're interested in keeping up with what's going on, watch the city's webpage. We post all of our agendas about a little bit over a week, just about a week in advance of the meeting. So you can check our website, check the agenda, and see the very same materials that the Planning Commission receives, so you can see what's going on and keep track of it.
Mr. Gilley, you have some additional comments.
I do. I'd like to start by saying, I've lived in Indian Hills since the 2001, 2002, starting out backing up to the 10th fairway. And in the current house that I mentioned that's in Mr. Jones's pictures on the 14th, since I think about 2005. I appreciate seeing all my neighbors out here tonight. I run past, I think, every one of your houses. I think every single one of them, virtually every single day of the year. And on Saturdays, some of your houses probably think I'm stalking you because of the number of times that I'm running back and forth behind there. So I know the subdivision absolutely inside and out. And over the last 4 days, I think I've had more contact with my neighbors in a 4-day period of time than in the 11 or 12 years that I've lived in the subdivision. I appreciate all the phone calls and the emails and the contact that I've had in that regard to let me know how you feel about the issue. I think there are two competing concerns that have been mentioned regarding this. And one is, how does the golf course stay open? And I don't think anyone that lives on the course actually wants the course to close down and turn into a hayfield. None of us really want that. The other side of it is, we don't want the course to stay open at the expense of damaging the subdivision and the residents who live there. As Joseph said, in a situation with a mature PUD, you have pretty close to two equal stakeholders in a situation like this, between the homeowners that have invested in the PUD now that it's matured over a 30-year period of time, as well as the owners of the property wishing to be developed. And this is, Joseph, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is probably the first time in the almost 14 years that I've been on the Planning Commission that we've had a situation come up with a rezoning this close to inside of a mature development. It's not the situation where we may have vacant land that backs up to a mature subdivision, but I can't think of another situation that's been this unique unless you can remember.
The closest thing has been when we rezoned the maintenance center down at Runnymede. That's probably the closest.
And as someone said, there was already a structure actually on there and a fire hall beside it. And I bring that point up because I think in a situation like this, the only way something like this could ever work or be successful is if you have a buy-in from the neighbors and the residents that live there that pertains to the issues that they brought up of the noise, the appearance, smell, safety, lighting, and those sorts of things. And I appreciate Mr. Huddleston volunteering to go back and have a full-blown neighborhood meeting to go over all of those things. But again, I think the outcome of that needs to be a substantial buy-in from the neighbors before we give any real serious consideration to that. There's a trust issue that I think that the neighbors have to know that is there. One of the big issues that I've been asked about over the last 4 days is once you have the proverbial bookends of this on one end and the Bojangles on the other, does the rest of the bookshelf, so to speak, fill in along the way? While we can't require an applicant to put restrictive covenants on the property, those have been very successful in other rezoning matters where compromise has been tried to be found. Perhaps restrictive covenants that say that the rest of that frontage in between there, or that backs up to South Church from there, have restrictive covenants so that it cannot be changed to commercial and vest the right of standing to enforce those with the HOA and the homeowners in the subdivision is something I would throw out to be considered at the neighborhood meeting that you had, Mr. Huddleston. And the last thing that I would suggest is that normally when we defer something after we've already had the public hearing, a lot of times it ends up coming back up on our day meeting. But sometimes when there's a lot of public involvement in that, we have insisted or placed that back on the nighttime agenda to ensure that more folks that may work during the day would have the opportunity to, even though it would not be a second public hearing, to be here and see firsthand what ultimately becomes of the situation.
Yes, we certainly can do that. That would not be a problem at all.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gilley. Any other comments or questions from members of the Planning Commission?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I would like to make a couple of comments. I also have received lots of phone calls and emails and hey, I got to talk to you about something like that, and I appreciate that, and that's the way business should be done. There are several questions, and I'm not going to repeat a lot of these that Mr. Gilley very well itemized out, but we need to, where's Mr. Huddleston? I lost him. Okay, there he is. Traffic, we need to make sure that that's addressed. I have some concerns about property values, and Mr. Gilley brought up a good point about the bookends, and I'm looking at the book, and in effect, to do that, you'd have to close the golf course, literally, to do that, and I want to let that, Mr. Huddleston, so you understand that and make sure that that's, that the neighbors are aware of that off the top of my head. But I consider what Mr. Gilley said to be very important, and I task you to make sure that every question is answered by every single person out here. That's your task.
Mr. Whitlock, can we call upon staff to participate in the neighborhood meeting as we've done with some other situations like this?
We would be very glad to attend. I think probably it would probably be a very good idea for us to attend, not necessarily to referee, but really to be a source of information. But we might even be able to secure a meeting room at a school to help find a place to meet. We would coordinate that with the applicant team.
Any other comments or questions? No, we're ready for a motion.
Chairman Lamb, I'll make a motion that we defer until, for 60 days or at least till the night meeting in February.
Second motion. Motion's made and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. The motion carries. I want to thank everybody that came in tonight to participate in this public hearing. I think my friend Mr. Taylor asked me on one of the many phone calls I got from you folks if there's any need in coming, that I think sometimes there's a mistrust that there's already been a deal cut and that it's a done deal, so to speak. And I assured him that it's no done deal, and we certainly wanted to encourage everybody to come and speak their thoughts if they chose to do so. So I do appreciate you coming and participating in our decision-making process here, and we're certainly going to have your comments on record, and we'll keep those in mind with any decision we make pertaining to this application. That being said, we'll move on to the next thing. I'll pause just a minute in case some of you decide you want to leave right now.
I didn't see you sitting out there. Good to see you.
How are you doing tonight? Good to see you. Thank you for coming.
I'm sorry, I had during the night, but I came back real quick. No, I'm not done. Microwave.
We appreciate it. Well, thank you guys for coming by.
That was better than I thought. That was better than I thought.
Appreciate your
Tell me that you saw these messages. How the entrance was a brand and
Okay. We did not call a recess, so I'll go ahead and proceed with the meeting. The next item up is staff reports. One item under staff reports tonight is proposed amendment to the Murfreesboro City Code, Chapter 22, pertaining to the Planning Commission. This is to designate the Planning Commission as the city's Design Review Commission. Mr. Adelot.
Yes, sir. Back in October, the Planning Commission conducted a public hearing to consider comprehensive amendments to the Gateway Design Overlay District regulations. After public hearing, after studying the matter, the Planning Commission recommended favorably the amendments. As our very capable, well-trained, and, all the nice things I can say about our city attorney, she was drafting the ordinance. She became aware that the state has actually passed enabling legislations to give the municipalities authorities to have a design review committee. Really, this law was passed after the city adopted the Gateway Design Overlay District regulations. And with that enabling legislation, she felt it was time that we just basically took the step and designated the Planning Commission as the Design Review Commission for the city under that law, and that'd be 654-133 of the Tennessee Code. So we are really bringing this to your attention. If you have any real strong objections, we want to know about it. But really, at this point, it's not going to change what we're doing. It really just gives us a set of suspenders to go along with the belt that we already wear. Tomorrow night, we'll be bringing it up just before the council conducts its public hearing, and we'll ask them to consider an ordinance to formally do this. I handed out to you a copy of the ordinance. It may be tweaked, knowing our legal staff, they may tweak it just maybe altering periods or commas or squigglies and Qs, but not any substantive changes before the matter is considered by council. If you have any questions, myself and Mr. Ives will be glad to answer them. Mr. Ives did most of the drafting on this to prepare it for your attention.
Will we need to conduct a public hearing at the Planning Commission level?
No, sir.
Okay.
Not at all. This is an amendment to the city code and not to our zoning ordinance.
Okay.
And it does not require a public hearing in order to do this.
Do you want a affirmative vote from the commission?
No action is required of you, but if you would like to offer your endorsement by passing a show by motion, that would be very appropriate also, so we can report.
I think it would be appropriate. I cannot see why it would not be.
I think what he's telling us is that he's going to ask the council to give us this whether we want it or not, but he'd like us to say we'll accept it. Is that pretty much it, Joseph?
I beg you to be graceful.
You can either accept it or we can find a new planning commission.
I would want to say, as Joseph mentioned, this is an addition to the city code section that establishes the planning commission, how the planning commission is appointed and how they serve and what their general duties are. And this then is an addition that will designate the planning commission as a design review commission for the city. And it will, as Joseph said, add suspenders to our belt and solidify any possible question about the gateway overlay regulations as design review regulations. Now clearly had that, but we felt it appropriate to tie what we're doing onto the authority that the legislature gave us a few years ago.
Okay. It's your recommendation that we endorse this, Joseph?
Yes, I do.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Mr. Adelaide, do you have any further business?
No, sir, I do not, but I will add that to report to you, I think everyone has their training except for one member, and he will be attending a session next week. He's coordinating with our Mr. Lewis to get his final training.
And the personal disclosure forms that were mailed out, do you want to comment on that? They need to be sent to the state this time.
You know, they got mailed out without me remembering what to do with them. Ms. Cope, or Jacob.
A letter went with them, self-addressed.
There was probably instructions on what to do with
It
them.
was an addressed envelope to the state of Tennessee in this case, which is different from years past.
Whatever the
You might just want to
instructions.
follow up that with everybody at some point.
Okay, we will.
Because I'm vague on it also.
There's no further business. We stand adjourned.